Hey budget gardeners, Vita Loki here. Join me today as I show you my process for deadheading, pruning, and fertilizing my annuals. So let's go. I love annuals. I love to supplement them with perennials in my landscape. When it comes to annuals, I love packing hanging baskets, window boxes, and container pots full of annuals. And many times I'll also sprinkle in some perennials. Many of the annuals are annuals that I started from seed, and they're from seed that I collected myself. What I'll do is I'll put links to many different videos down below showing you my process for starting these annuals from seed or planting up any of these container boxes that you're going to see today. I like to fertilize my annuals once a week. However, when the weather is really hot, and when I say hot, anywhere from 85 degrees Fahrenheit or hotter, I prefer not to fertilize my plants on those days. The reason is the plants are undergoing a lot of stress, so it's best just to keep them watered, but you don't want to fertilize them. And when it comes to watering or fertilizing, you want to do that early in the morning or in the evening. Since we're just getting through a heat wave, I was watering my plants every morning and every evening. Fertilizing was halted. Today is a nice cool day and it's going to be cool for a number of days. I figured I'd bring you along and show you how I go about fertilizing my annuals. We're currently sitting off my bedroom balcony. I love it up here. I have 4 window boxes. They're filled with a whole bunch of different plants. In this video, I'll also show you my process for deadheading or pruning any of the plants in these container boxes or in the landscape. So let me take you in for a closer look and I'll show you what's happening in each of these window boxes. When you're looking down off the balcony, you can see my rose garden as well as my vegetable raised garden beds. You can also see in the backyard that I have a lot of shade-loving plants tucked in where the lawn ends and where the woods begin. I also have my old arborvitae bed and a fire pit. Lots of fun things to look at from up here. This is also a fun space for me to just sit and relax on the cooler days and just take in the birds as they come to my bird feeder and as they have a drink of water or a bath. I like to keep my fertilizer in this little Tupperware, and you can see that I'm using a granular fertilizer, and this is Miracle-Gro all-purpose fertilizer food. No matter what fertilizer you use, you always want to read the instructions on the fertilizer packet. So we're going to add a little bit of fertilizer in my watering can, and then I'm going to add water to this. The first thing I like to do is just basically take my spillers, anything that's spilling off the front here, and fix them up. You know how it is when you have wind, it's very easy for the wind to move your spillers around. So I'm just going through and seeing if any of the spillers need to be brought back in towards the front. Now is a great time for me to come in and pull any weeds because oftentimes weeds do appear, they just float through the air. I like to carry a bucket with me so I can put all those weeds in there and clippings as well. The plants in this container box are Creeping Jenny. It's a perennial where I live. We have Lismachia, which I believe is an annual where I live. There's the beautiful variegated vinca vine, which is an annual where I live. And then we have a whole bunch of petunias that I started from seed, and these are annuals where I live. Now is also a great time to come in and start deadheading or pruning any plants that need it. With this petunia, you can see that the blossom has gone by, so I'm going to follow it right down to the end of the stem, and I can go ahead and snip that off. Deadheading the petunia is very important. It tells the plant to continue producing blooms and not to go to seed. I also have another bloom that has already gone by, and I want to go ahead and cut that off, so I'm going to follow it down. You can see right in there, it's just starting to create its seed pod. Some petunias, you don't have to do this to. They self-clean. But if you have petunias that you bought, most likely that are not, let's say, proven winners, then you need to come in and do what I'm doing, just to clean up your plant. Sometime during the middle of summer, I most likely will come in here and do a hard cutback or a hard prune on my petunias. They start to get kind of leggy and they don't look very good, so they can benefit from that. It can be tricky sometimes to figure out what to cut off. So right here, I'm going to leave this alone. This will eventually become a bloom. Whereas this right here, eventually that's going to become a seed pod and it's going to produce seeds. I want to take that off. I don't want this to go to seed. Whereas it's very easy to tell in a situation like this, okay, well, we know that this has already gone by. We can take that off. Notice how lush and green the leaves are on this plant. If they were starting to turn yellow, that's usually an indicator that the plant needs fertilizer. But plants can turn yellow for many reasons. Sometimes they're getting too much water. Sometimes the plant is getting too much fertilizer. So it takes time to really know your plants and what they're asking for. Doing a job like this is so satisfying. I like to do this every time I fertilize my plants. But I definitely did not want to do this job on those really hot days that we were having. The plants were already undergoing a lot of stress. So my plan for today's video is just to take you around my yard, and I'll show you different examples of different plants and what I'm doing. Here's an example of a flower bud, so we're going to leave that alone. And this one as well. We're not going to touch that. Now that we're all done deadheading or pruning the plants that needed to be pruned, weeding the container pot, fixing up any of the trailers, making sure that they're spilling on the front here, I'm going to put the window box back up. I don't want to water it on top of this bird bath because I don't want any of the fertilizer to leach into the water. My little birdies need to drink fresh water, not fertilizer water. Now that we've put the window box back up, time to fertilize. I like to fertilize until I can see the water coming out from the bottom of the pot or the container. You don't want to be fertilizing on a very hot sunny day. Like I mentioned earlier, it puts a lot of stress on the plant. Also, you don't want to water in the middle of the day because if you water during the middle of the day, a lot of water gets evaporated. And not only that, you can cause some sort of burn on your plants or your leaves. So it really is best to do this job when it comes to watering either in the early morning or later in the day, during the late afternoon into the early evening hours. So I'm going to continue watering until I can see water coming out from the bottom of my window box. This time of year, the pots and containers are taking a lot of water. We need to make sure that they're happy. And you can see that water is now dripping from the bottom of the container pot, which is yet another reason why you always want to have drainage holes in your pots and containers. After I'm all done taking care of the 3 remaining window boxes that are up here off my bedroom balcony, we'll tackle some more container pots. I have plenty of examples to show you. I'm so excited to finally get this done. Before we tackle our next container, I just wanted to show you when I'm downstairs looking up. I really do enjoy looking at these window boxes off my bedroom balcony, both when I'm up there as well as when I'm down in my landscape. Really pretty. Here we are at my side porch, which is on the south side of my house. We have 2 container pots here that we put together earlier in the spring. So let's go ahead and tackle these next. We have vinca vine here. So I'm just checking to make sure that all the pieces are coming forward. Again, when you have windy days, oftentimes what happens with your spillers is that they get tangled up inside the plants. You just want to pull them out. Another part of maintenance that I like to do is if I have a spiller, like the vinca vine, that's gotten too long, at this point I can come in and snip it back. And the reason is I don't want this taking over and just falling all over the ground here. Also, many times some spillers, like vinca vine, might root themselves. I like it for the spilling effect, but I don't necessarily want it on the ground here. So I'm just going to come in and I'm going to follow it up to a set of leaves, and I'm just going to clip right there. I don't want to follow it right here because if I do that, what will happen is I'll have this piece of stem. So I want it to basically end at a point where there are a set of leaves. So we'll snip right there. And that just keeps the plant in check. In this planter, we have pelargoniums or zonal geraniums. And these are geraniums that I got for free last year. I overwintered them bare root. If you want to find out more about that, check out the description below. They are looking gorgeous. I am in love with them. I think they look beautiful. Part of the maintenance is coming in and deadheading it. So you have a blossom here that's gone by. You just want to follow it down to the end of the stem, and you can go ahead, use hand pruners, and just cut that off. Not only does that tidy up the plant, it tells the plant to put its energy into producing more flower buds, which eventually will produce more flowers. If I find any leaves that don't look good, I also like to remove those as well. Many times with pelargoniums, that's what they do, is that they just have leaves that are at the base of the plant that start to turn yellow or brown. You can go ahead and remove those. Even though this is blooming right here, I noticed that the stem is broken, so I'm going to go ahead and just snip this off. Another thing I'm going to do right now is this trailing lobelia, which is an annual that I started from seed, and it's from seed that I collected. What's going on here is it's getting smothered a little bit by the leaves of my geranium. It is totally okay to come in and snip back some of the leaves, basically that lower canopy. And that just allows it so that this plant gets more sunlight, and it needs sunlight in order for it to thrive. So I'm just coming in here and just removing some of the bottom leaves. And again, this is maintenance that really needs to be done frequently, because over time, the leaves of my geranium will come in again and cover this plant. And it's not harmful to the geranium. The geranium has plenty of other leaves on the plant, so it's totally fine. And now I can come in here and fluff this up a little bit. That's a big reason why you see blooms down here at the bottom, but you don't see a lot of blooms in the back here. It's because they were being shaded out. For the trailing lobelia, part of the maintenance that I could do is come in and snip off any of the blooms that have gone by. The way that the plant works is it started blooming down at the bottom here. Then these blooms started to go by. And then what happens is they look kind of unsightly, and the blooms on the top look a lot more beautiful. So what I can do is just follow it back to basically a healthy set of leaves. So I have a healthy set of leaves right here. I have some blooms right there. So I can go ahead and snip that back. And it just cleans up the plant, because that happens often with trailing lobelia. You'll notice that it's starting to turn kind of brown underneath. So it's totally okay to come in here. You can use your fingers or hand pruners, and you can just snip those off. Once again, we are telling our annuals, continue producing flower buds, continue producing flowers. We don't want our plants to go to seed. There will be a time and day for that, especially if you're trying to collect your own seeds. And I'll show you in the fall time my process for collecting seeds from all these plants, including trailing lobelia. But I don't want the plant to produce seed right now. I want it to continue blooming for me. And I just want it to look tidier. I have another trailing lobelia that I started from seed, and look how beautiful it is. I love this red, white, and blue patriotic container pot that I put together. So again, I can come in here and I can just remove some of the leaves off of my pelargonium that either look bad or perhaps they're shading out my trailing lobelia. And then I can also come in at the base here and I can snip off any of the brown spent blossoms on my lobelia plant. I still have a lot of summer left. Summer has just begun, in fact. So we want our plants to look healthy and good. We want to take good care of them. We don't want to give up on them. And then I can go ahead and basically just fluff up my plant a little bit. And now the final maintenance piece left to do is to just water these. Again, I'm going to be using Miracle-Gro fertilizer. I wanted to mention watering the plants is definitely very important. Fertilizing them is also extremely important, because if you don't do that, the plants are leaching water out of their container pots. Every time it rains or every time they get water, the fertilizer is coming out. So it's very important to supplement and add more fertilizer into these container pots. When I made my own potting mix for all my container pots, I added compost in them. That also helps feed the plants that are in here, but they still need that supplemental fertilizer. All of that helps feed these very hungry plants. Annuals bloom spring, summer, and fall, especially where I live. Where you live, it might even be into the winter months. So you want to make sure you're continuing to feed your plants. This container pot is on drip irrigation, and so it gets water on a daily basis. For that reason, I don't need to give it a ton of water. I just want to give it enough so that it's getting some fertilizer mixed in as well. One more pot to tackle over here, and then I'll show you what's next. Off of my side porch, my back porch, and my front porch, I have window boxes. And I have a total of 7 window boxes. They are all pretty much the same. They have a lysmachia in them. They also, which is this one right here, and it's behaving itself. Sometimes it can trail all the way down to the ground, but for right now, we don't need to trim it back. The container boxes also include impatiens. And when it comes to the impatiens, some of the impatiens are really starting to wake up. They just needed a little bit of that warm weather, but not too warm. It's been pretty hot lately. So I'm expecting by next week they're really going to flush. Impatiens are an annual here where I live. So what I'm doing is I'm just checking everything over, and again with the lysmachia, if it's moved around, I'm just fixing it, making sure that it's continuing to trail. And I also have another perennial in here. This is called dead nettle. And dead nettle is beautiful. There's some maintenance work that needs to be done. They like to bloom, and once the blooms go by, just like this one here, I like to come in and follow it down. So I'm going to follow it down to a set of leaves. Again, I'm going to pinch it right above the set of leaves because I don't want a stem sticking out here. So we're just going to snip it back. And the reason for that is this will continue blooming for me throughout the season if I keep it deadheaded. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to continue deadheading all of the dead nettle. And other than that, I'm just checking the trailing vines, making sure that they're behaving themselves, they're not too long. I'm making sure that there are none that have gone like on the other side of the box that need to be brought forward. And then we're going to fertilize. I can see that the impatiens have a ton of buds on them. I'm really excited to show you what these look like when they are fully in bloom. They just look so pretty when they're all blooming. In regards to the dead nettle, the other name for it is lamium. And I also did the same thing. I just made sure when it came to lamium, since it's a trailing plant, I made sure to just pull it out so that it's trailing over the side of my window boxes. The other thing I'm checking for are weeds. And as I see any weeds, I'm pulling those out. With the impatiens, sometimes there are some yellow leaves at the base. I'm also checking for any yellow leaves. So we're going to go ahead and deadhead this dead nettle. And you can see all of the buds that are all in the impatiens. It's just a matter of time. And they're going to fill right in. And I just love adding perennials from my landscape. I think they are such a nice interest in a container pot. So I will do the same exact thing to the 5 other window boxes that I have. So I have 3 on my back porch, and then I have 2 that are on my front porch. I just love having window boxes on my porches. I just think it adds a lot of nice color and interest. And I also enjoy that these are in the shade. It's nice to pack them with impatiens. And I'm making sure that the water is dripping out from below on these ones, so I know that they're good to go. I have a lot of shade in my yard, and I also have a lot of trees. So for that reason, I love taking advantage of the trees and putting hanging baskets on them. It's a cheap way to make a lot of impact, I feel. And you can reuse your hanging baskets year after year. Again, you'll see very similar plants in these hanging baskets as what you've already seen today. They're plants that are either perennials in my landscape or they're annuals that I started from seed. This is a type of lysmachia. It's called creeping Jenny. Even though it's invasive here in New Hampshire, I like to keep it in check by keeping it in pots and containers. I think it's a beautiful spiller with a nice chartreuse color. You see that we have the same plant that I have in other container pots. This is lamium or dead nettle. Part of the maintenance will be coming in and again cutting it back just to get rid of the spent blooms to encourage it to keep blooming. If I see any pieces that don't look good, they're dead, we can go ahead and remove those. With the creeping Jenny, I'm just looking to see if she's crept anywhere inside of my container. And if so, I just want to be sure to pull her out so she's trailing. The impatiens are, again, they're all budded up, so within about a week or so, they should be blooming better for us. So I'm going to continue on with this project of deadheading, cleaning up, pulling out spillers, then fertilizing. I have a total of 14 containers that I need to tackle. Not only do I have these hanging baskets along the trees here in my backyard, I also have some lining my driveway. And it's just such a nice way to welcome visitors with all those hanging baskets. And those hanging baskets are also in a very shady area, so I can get away with using the same type of plants. I have been finding weeds sometimes in these hanging baskets or window boxes, so I've been removing those as I see them. Many of my container pots are not on drip irrigation, so it is so important to be watering and fertilizing these container pots. And you can see how quickly the water just comes right through. So many times I will water them well, and especially with these guys, because I can feel it. I can lift it and feel that it feels pretty light. I'll let it drain out, and then I'll just give it a small little drink of water again. Not much, just a little. And I can pick it up just like this, and I can feel that it's nice and heavy now, and that's a good sign. I did want to show you that the dead nettle or lamium has a couple of different colors. The ones that I have, they're either going to be a little bit on the soft pink side, and then I even have some that are a different shade of more of a purple. And here's a great example. So you can see these ones are more purple, and then these ones here are definitely a little bit on the pinker side. Okay, you know the drill. Let me finish doing all the hanging baskets, and then we'll tackle another container pot. When it comes to fertilizing, deadheading, pruning, annuals, perennials, it's really not a task that I think a lot of us enjoy. I wish it was that easy. I wish we could just take our plants, plunk them in, be it annuals or perennials, even vegetables, and just let them be. But if you want to have a productive garden in terms of fruits, in terms of vegetables or flowers, it does take work. And that's why I love making these videos, just showing you what I'm working on in my garden and when is the right time to do different tasks. So we're at my front porch here. I have a whole bunch of container pots. Let's take you in for a closer look. We have vinca vine. It's behaving itself. It doesn't really need any work or maintenance. We also have lobularia or alyssum. One thing that you might find with your lobularia this time of year is that it's getting very leggy. If it's getting leggy and it's not producing as many blooms, you want to go in and you want to start deadheading or pruning back your lobularia or alyssum. Here's a great example. Yes, this still has a few blooms or blossoms left on it, but if you look at it, it's starting to not look so great. I want to go ahead and I want to deadhead this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to follow it all the way down to basically a set of leaves, which would be right here. And you'll see that right there is a beautiful blossom. So we're going to cut right above it. Since I don't have many of this plant in this container pot, I'm okay with just coming in and doing this job the way I'm doing it, which is following it down a stem. And I can cut right here, or I can cut at the next leaf node, which is right over here, like that. And that method is called deadheading. It's basically just taking a spent bloom and cutting that off. If you had a ton of this type of plant, and this method works with not only alyssum, it could work with other plants like the trailing lobelia. If you had a ton of that plant in your yard, another option is you could prune it, which means taking a big chunk like this, taking something like your hand pruners, and cutting it back. So in that instance, we're not selectively deadheading, we're pruning back a plant. It really depends on personal preference. When I only have a small handful of plants in a container pot, I prefer to come in to each stem and deadhead each spent blossom. But if I had a ton of a plant in the landscape, kind of like dianthus, let's say, I have a bunch of that, I prefer to come right in, take a handful, and cut it back, and that's called pruning. But no matter what you do, it is important to do that to many of your plants, and it's going to depend on the type of plant that you have, because at times plants will stop blooming as prolifically for you. So you want to make sure you keep them blooming. So I'm just going to check my creeping Jenny, and I want to make sure that she's creeping over the edge of this container pot, because after all, that's part of her function. That's her goal, is to creep over the container pot. Especially with creeping Jenny, if you don't do this, she'll tend to creep towards the center of the pot. And as she creeps towards the center of this container pot, she will then start rooting herself in. It's not a bad thing, but aesthetically it just looks nicer to have her creeping over the side of the pot. And then I can go ahead and just spread it out a little bit like this. In the example of this alyssum right here, again, you can see that it has started to go by. And if we follow it down right here, that's where it's going to bloom again. So we want to make sure that we cut it back to that point. So right there. In the center of this pot, I have dahlias. And I love overwintering my dahlias bare root in my unheated garage. They look wonderful, but they require a lot of maintenance, but they are well worth the maintenance. So I'm zooming you in for a closer look at our dahlias. Right here is an example of a flower bud, and right here as well. They will eventually bloom. And you can see the color. This is the color of the dahlia. But right next door over here, that's an example of a spent bloom or a spent blossom. We want to deadhead it because we want the dahlia to continue blooming for us. You can see that there's a slight lull in this plant. She is begging to be deadheaded. So I'm going to follow this spent bloom down to the end, and I'm going to snip. And I'm trying to be careful because I don't want to snip these buds right here because these are going to bloom for us. We have another one here that has already gone by. And it's important for me to show you the examples of a flower bud that has already gone by, just so you know what to look for, versus a flower bud that's still going to open up and bloom for us. And another one that's going to bloom for us here and one over here. In this situation here, we have a blossom that's gone by and another one that's gone by. So in that case, we can actually follow it all the way down, right down to the end of that stem. We still have a little bit of a blossom here, so we're going to leave that alone. Some other maintenance I like to do is just check for any leaves on my dahlia that don't look very good. For example, there's one right here, so I can just go in and snip that right off, just to clean up my plant. And now the plant can continue putting its energy into blooming more. All those flower buds should be blooming within a few days. I'm so excited. And time to fertilize. This container pot is on drip irrigation, so again, I don't need to give it a ton of water. I just need to give it enough so that it gets fertilizer in it. This is why it's so important to be doing this early in the morning. I don't want to do it later in the day because notice there is some water going on the leaves. That's okay. You try not to get it on the leaves if you can help it, but if you do it during the day when the sun is scorching down, it can burn the leaves. So optimally, you would be watering down at the base here, but if you do it on the top, just do it early in the morning before the sun hits it so it has enough time to shake off the water that's on there. I have a diplodenia that also has alyssum in this pot. We recently potted this up. It really doesn't require a lot right now. We're just giving it a little bit of water with fertilizer. We put together these container pots recently. They have trailing vinca, and I don't really need to do anything with the vinca because they're already trailing and they look pretty. We also have some coleus in here, and in that video I had shown you my process for pinching them back so that they would branch out more. One thing that you could be doing this time of year is pinching back your coleus. If it's getting very tall, very leggy, you just want to follow it down to a set of leaves and you want to pinch it back. And that will help encourage it to branch more. Another thing you want to be doing this time of year is if your coleus are starting to flower, you can go ahead and remove those flower stalks. I'll show you that in a little bit. And then a final thing you could be doing with the plant that's in this container pot has to do with your calla lilies. If you have calla lilies that have blooms that are spent or have gone by, it's important to follow the flower stalk down and cut those back because you want the plant to continue blooming for you. And it will bloom for you throughout the season as long as you're deadheading it. Cutting back the spent blooms on your calla lily also makes it just aesthetically more pleasing. I don't have a good example to show you here, but let's just say, for example, that this guy right here was starting to flop. It was turning more of a brown color. It just didn't look very good. That means that the blossom has gone by. What you would want to do is just follow it all the way down, and then with some sort of like hand pruners, you would go ahead and cut that back. That just encourages your plant to produce more blooms for you. But all I'm going to do today is just give this pot a good drink of water. These pots were put together very recently. I can't wait for them to take off now that they are all potted up. We are at our final area, which is called the old arborvitae bed. I used to have 3 arborvitae in this flower bed. They got too big, they did not look good. We removed them and we ended up making this more of an annual bed. There are some perennials in here, but I love packing it with a whole bunch of annuals. So even though these are not in container pots, I wanted to just show you that number one, I always fertilize this area. I fertilize all annuals, be it in container pots or out in the landscape. When it comes to out in the landscape, I don't have annuals everywhere in my yard, but I strategically place them in a number of areas, including in this flower bed. And I wanted to show you there are a few other annuals I haven't talked about today that I want to show you what I do in terms of maintenance, but also I'm going to fertilize this whole area just like I do with all my other annuals. I fertilize this area once a week. So there's more of the trailing lobelia. Look how vibrant it is. And there are a couple of different colors that I tucked in this flower bed. There is no additional maintenance that I need to do with these, but if I noticed that they were looking leggy or if there were areas that looked dead because they've gone by, I would do the same exact thing. I would come in and I would individually be deadheading them, or I could just take them, take a chunk, and then just trim them back, which is called pruning. But I'm not going to do that because look how pretty they look. So those look fine. The one plant that I definitely want to show you is coleus. It's in the center there. Many coleus plants send out a flower stalk. They are pretty, and I know that certain insects and hummingbirds, bees, they really enjoy the blossoms. But it comes down to personal preference, whether you like the blooms on there or whether you don't. I like to collect the seeds off my coleus, but it's still early. I don't want to collect them yet. For that reason, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to deadhead the plant. So right here is a blossom, and if you follow it down, that right there is a flower bud, which will eventually become a blossom. And what I'm going to do is just follow it to the end of that flower stalk there, and I can pinch that off. You can see that there is another flower bud down there. I could leave it or I can go ahead and pinch it off. Since I'm noticing it right now, I'm going to go ahead and pinch it off. And if you wanted to size control your plant, now is a great time to do that. If you had a very leggy plant, you could always come in here and you could pinch it back down to another set of leaves, like down here, for example. You can see that it is starting to branch out. So it's really up to you. Another thing you could be doing this time of year is removing any tattered leaves or leaves that don't look good. For example, this leaf here, I could come in here, just follow it all the way in and snip it off. It's just normal maintenance that's good to do on your plants. As many of you know, I love to grow begonias from seed. But again, I'm not trying to collect seeds this time of year, so I don't want my plant to be creating seed pods. So this is an example of a seed pod. I'm going to go ahead and remove that. This is also a seed pod, so I'm going to remove that. And I'm continuing to tell my plant, please keep producing flowers for me. Do not go to seed just yet. If I notice any leaves that don't look good, it's also a good time to come in and just do a little bit of house cleaning. And there is other maintenance to be done in this flower bed, but we're just trying to stay on the scope of today's project, which is deadheading annuals, as well as cleaning up plants that just don't look good, and then finally giving them fertilizer. So I'm going to continue cleaning up those flowers and deadheading, and then after that, we'll give everything a nice drink of water mixed with fertilizer. I just came up with a new term. Well, at least it's new to me. It's called squirrel moments. It is so easy in the garden to have what I like to call squirrel moments. You know, like when you're busy doing something and you see a squirrel and you get distracted. The same thing can happen in our gardens. I am trying not to do that. I'm trying to stay on task. And today's task was, again, visiting all of my annuals, even if the annuals were mixed with perennials, visiting my annuals, deadheading, cleaning them up, and then eventually fertilizing them. I like to do that, again, once a week. I think it's very important, and I'm trying really hard not to get distracted because there's so many other things that can happen in a flower bed. Let's take this flower bed, for example. As I'm working in here, I can see that my ajuga needs to be deadheaded. I can see that my candy tuft needs to be deadheaded. There are weeds to pull. There is mulch that still needs to be put down. I have a bird bath that still needs to be cleaned. So you get the point. There are always going to be jobs and projects to do be it indoors, outdoors. So one thing that really works well for me is to try to chunk the project. And just by doing what we're doing today, I am very happy with just keeping on task. I will say that I have more annuals in my landscape. I have some up my driveway on the right, and those are mostly wax begonias. So I'll be doing the same thing. I'm going to be checking them and giving them some fertilizer, deadheading them. I also have some wax begonias in my backyard in my rose garden. Same exact thing. And my goal for today is just to do those. And if I can get all the annuals done today, 1 week from now, as long as the weather is cooperating, I'll do the same thing. And remember what I said earlier, that when it comes to the weather, you don't want to be fertilizing on a really hot day. It puts a lot of stress on the plants. That's why today was a perfect day. And 1 week from now, if it's still very hot, I'll wait a day, or I'll do it the day before. I'll just watch the weather. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope that you learned something from it. If you have any questions or comments, as always, please drop them down in the comment section below. And I'd love to know, how are you doing in your garden right now? It's my understanding that a lot of us are having a heat wave, or we're getting a lot of rain. So let me know how you're doing in your garden. And until the next video, make it a great day with gardening. Trying not to have a squirrel moment. I need to finish the job on hand. Done.